Hello and welcome to another special bonus episode of Damn Interesting Week. This bonus episode is all about puzzles and games, so in keeping with that theme, I've got a puzzle for you, the listener, to ponder. A man needs to get a fox, a chicken, and a bag of grain across the river. If the boat is traveling east at 45 miles per hour, what time will the doctor be performing surgery on their own son? If you think you know the answer, get in touch and we'll pick one lucky winner to receive a brand new sense of personal accomplishment. My name is Jennifer Lee Noonan.
I'm Angela Epley.
I'm Spurr-Chen.
I'm Bradley Calhoun.
And these were some damn interesting weeks.
First Link.
All right, this next article is from The Atlantic, and it's called The Puzzle That Will Outlast the World.
Ooh.
So the author is A.J. Jacobs, and it's, again, a first-person account of his attempt to own literally the world's hardest puzzle. Spoiler alert, he does now have it. But to understand what the puzzle is and how it works, we have to dive a little into the history of physical puzzles, starting with the Chinese ring puzzle, which dates back about 2,000 years. The point of a Chinese ring puzzle is to remove a set of rings from a bar to which they're attached, and it's not really difficult in a conceptual sense. Like, there's a pattern of moves, and you can learn the pattern, and then you'll know how to solve it. But the way it's designed is recursive, meaning that it takes exponentially more moves depending on how many rings are attached to it. So solving a 3-ring puzzle only takes 5 moves, but a 6-ring puzzle takes 42 moves, a 9-ring puzzle takes 341 moves, and so on.
Wow.
This is why it's also sometimes called a patience puzzle or a generation puzzle in Chinese, because culturally, the idea was that if you had a puzzle with enough rings on it, you could spend your whole life making moves before you'd have to pass it on to your children. And down the line, someone might eventually finish a puzzle that their great-great-grandparent had started solving.
Wow.
So Jacobs really liked that idea for his family, but he wanted something harder that could really express the vastness of time and the insignificance of humanity. You know, the way you explain it to your kids. So he reached out to a master puzzle maker in the Netherlands named Oscar van Deventer, and he took on the challenge. Jacobs describes the new puzzle that Oscar created for him, which Oscar named a Jacob's Ladder, as a cross between a Jenga tower, a giant corkscrew, and a girder from a skyscraper.
What?
They do have a picture of it, if that isn't evocative enough for you. The puzzle's main wooden column is studded with 55 interlocking wooden pegs, which together trap a black corkscrew rod running up the middle. And you have to turn the pegs in the proper order to remove the rod, but of course the catch is you have to turn the pegs many, many, many times. How many times, you ask? Well, the current record for the hardest puzzle is a 65-ring Chinese puzzle owned by collector Jerry Slocum, which remains unsolved because it would take 18 quintillion moves, or a 1 followed by 19 zeros.
What?
Jacob's Ladder is significantly harder than that. It will take 1.2 decillion moves, or a 1 followed by 33 zeros. If you were to twist 1 peg per second forever, the puzzle would take about 40 septillion years to solve. By that time, the sun would have long ago destroyed the Earth, and in fact, all light in the universe would have been extinguished with only black holes remaining. And even if you make the moves much faster, there's a little friction involved in each twist, such that if only one atom were to rub off during each move, the whole puzzle would erode into nothing long before you could solve it.
Wow.
But it exists, and it lives in Jacob's house as a permanent existential reminder of infinity. His kids don't seem that impressed by it. When he first unpacked it, his youngest son's comment was, "It's about the journey, not the destination." To which Jacobs replied, "Exactly, except without the eye roll part." So as long as he's not forcing them to participate, I guess. But, like, they're going to inherit this thing, and I just...
It's also the only object of its kind, so if you throw it out, you're a huge jerk.
Exactly.
I could see this being a cursed object.
There you go.
100 years into the future. Just multiple generations destroyed by this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, really, the only solution to get rid of the curse is to do the atom rubbing off thing to, like, wear it down to nothing.
Yeah.
So you just...
This thing is going to sprout religions and cults in the future. I'm calling it now.
Get the whole village in. Someone's always on guard, twisting the pegs. Next link?
Next link.
Well, I want to go back to awesome women to talk about because this February is already hitting me real hard. So The Ringer's got an amazing article about Amy Schneider and the art of keeping Jeopardy winning streaks secret.
Oh, I've been watching her. She's been doing really, really well.
Oh, yeah. We start off on November 17th of 2021, where Amy Schneider is just another Jeopardy contestant carrying out a ritual for those who managed to make the Trivia Olympics. Hosting a watch party with a small group of friends, Schneider knew, of course, what most of the people in the room didn't. She not only won the game, but would go on to win at least another 38, not to mention the cool $1.3 million prize.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because, as you can imagine, the show does not air live, right? Jeopardy actually records a week's worth of games on each day, and they have 46 tape days that are scattered throughout the year. So the show does tell them, tell as few people as possible about what will unfold in the interim. Quote, the rule of thumb they gave us is anyone who would have been at the taping if they had allowed an audience was safe to tell. And that's because they've kept the audience closed to the public since early 2020, #pandemic. But for Schneider, who actually won her first game on September 28th, that meant keeping her success quiet outside a group including her girlfriend and a very, very, very small handful of others. And Amy Schneider is not the first player to have to balance this secrecy and headline-worthy money. In fact, Jeopardy's most decorated champions have all told stories about the period before their fortunes became famous. Quote, it's like, okay, how do I make sure that Sony Pictures doesn't get mad at me and take away my big check? That's definitely a good motivator.
Yeah, I can't believe they don't just make them sign full NDAs. Like, you can't tell anybody what's happened. But I guess they used to do it in front of an audience, so there was always some group of people that knew.
Exactly. Yeah. Austin Rogers, who won 12 games and $400,000 in 2017, describes it as, we can't stop you from spoiling it, but just don't. And, you know, one of the arguments for shutting up about it, he says, the show promises to paint it in this great way, and you want that surprise to happen for everyone else, so don't go around spoiling it. And for those champions who have just won not only a lot of money, but maybe quit your job, possibly start a new life on a tropical island amount of cash, this is a really hard secret to keep, right? I mean, Rogers admits that he, like Schneider, hosted watch parties for his games. And, quote, the snowball effect was real. The first one, 3 or 4 friends came. The second one, 5 or 6. And by the 9th one, the bar was packed. Larissa Kelly, a 4-time contestant who was part of the winning team in 2019's All-Star Games and originally won 6 games and $222,000 back in 2008, won these funds in the midst of completing her dissertation. Quote, the teller was taken a bit back with me coming in dressing like a schlubby grad student with a huge check.
Yeah.
But she ended up being saved by a second teller who happened to be a Jeopardy fan. And she was like, no, this is legitimate. It's okay. And, you know, for players like Schneider, whose streaks have required repeat trips to Los Angeles just to keep doing those tapings, the secrecy of a streak in progress is even harder to preserve. For example, Ken Jennings, he had no option but to let his bosses know what was going on because they had to cover for him at work with a series of excuses about sudden conflicts and illnesses, all to the point where Jennings felt like he had a secret identity. Quote, lying to everyone I know for months on end is taking a psychological toll on me as well, he wrote in his 2006 memoir, Brainiac. And for Schneider, she's introduced in each of her games as, quote, an engineering manager from Oakland, California. But this has kind of turned out to be a little bit of a lie. Quote, I actually, after a bit, stopped being a manager just because Jeopardy was taking up so much of my time that I couldn't give my team the attention they needed. Now she's at a different position at the company that does not involve managing direct reports. So it's a really cool story that kind of deals with fame, the weirdness of timing, and having to kind of manage it all. But if you're a Jeopardy fan, the whole article is definitely worth a read.
Yeah, that's exciting. I have one of my mom's cousins was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Oh.
And they showed the episode. I was like, oh, cool. He like won a lot of money. But also I was like, I don't know who this guy is. Like, this doesn't affect my life. And for him, he was like, I've been keeping this secret. And I'm like, I don't really feel like anything was kept from me. You know,
there are lots of secrets you've been keeping from me, but I'm not particularly invested. So
yeah. Yeah. So, but good for you. I'm glad people get to win game shows. That's awesome.
Yeah, hopefully our time will come. I feel like we're amassing all kinds of trivia on this podcast alone.
That's right. We're gearing up.
Next link?
Next link.
All right, well, get ready for a nice hit of nostalgia because this next article from The Guardian is called The People Making New Games for Old Consoles.
Ooh.
Wow.
And it's exactly what it sounds like. There are apparently a whole bunch of indie game developers who are making new games for consoles like the Atari 2600 and the NES. And these, again, are not just digital programs that run on emulators. They are actually making physical cartridges that you plug into these old machines.
How?
I don't know, the same way they made them before, factories. I mean, you can. It's not new technology. It's old technology. They know how.
That's true, but I mean, I guess it's artisanal video game creation then?
Yeah, I mean, they're small runs. They're not, blowing up the market entirely. It's more about, tapping into those collectors and being able to sell them for a pretty high price, which we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, the demand is simply there. In the collectible market, old games have been going for unbelievable prices, including the recent sale of a mint copy of Super Mario 64 for $1.5 million.
What?
Yeah, and according to Josh Fairhurst from console indie developer Limited Run, the market isn't even just old people like us trying to relive their youth. He says a significant number of their sales go to young people who weren't even alive when these consoles were popular. He says it's basically like the same retro cool factor that makes hipsters want to own albums on vinyl instead of MP3s, right? And Dennis Mendel, head of Strictly Limited Games in Germany, also points out that young people especially are keenly aware that when they buy digital games, they aren't actually buying the game. They're buying a license to play the game, and at any point, these modern developers can go in and update their code, or in some cases, delete your ownership of the game entirely without warning. So that also explains some of the desire to own a physical cartridge that nobody can mess with, right? And, on the developer side of things, they're also very excited to be making games in these very low-res, low-memory settings because one reason, of course, is game developers are also gamers themselves, so they're getting that same nostalgia hit. But Fairhurst says retro hardware also appeals to developers because games can be created with just 2 or 3 people. And they know that their audience will appreciate the fun factor for what it is, instead of bashing them for not having beautifully rendered cinematics or good enough voice actors or all the other trappings that are expected of a AAA title. You have that permanent out where you can say, oh, well, we only had 8K of memory, so that this is all we could do.
It's like the stakes are permanently lowered in this category.
Exactly. And in some cases, these developers actually are industry veterans who started their careers making these exact type of games. Audacity Games, for example, was founded by Gary Kitchen and David Crane, who both worked at Activision in the early 80s. They just released a new game called Circus Convoy, and they've gone all out on the retro feel. When you order it, it comes in a little cardboard box, and the box art is god-awful, just like it used to be. It's one of those, a pencil drawing that you got your friend's friend to do. It looks terrible, which they 100% did that on purpose. And some of these companies are also re-releasing old games that are popular but rare. For example, Limited Run recently secured the rights to make new copies of a game called Shantae for the Game Boy Color, which goes for about $600 on the used market. Meanwhile, Strictly Limited released a game called Ultra Core for the Mega Drive, which was originally designed by a company called DICE, who is now famous for the Battlefield series. But back when they made Ultra Core, they were nobody, and their game actually got canceled by the publisher just before it was supposed to be released. So to some people, this is like finding a previously unpublished work by J.D. Salinger, right? It's a classic even before anybody's seen it. And Strictly Limited did an initial run of just 2,000 cartridges for Ultra Core, thinking, well, let's see what happens. And they sold out almost immediately. This market has gone from nothing to massive very, very quickly.
Wow.
Unfortunately, as you pointed out, Angie, none of this comes cheap. Fairhurst says that between the custom PCB boards and the injection molding for the cartridges, the base cost for them to make these new old games comes out to about $30 to $40 each. He says they can't get away with selling the new cartridges for more than about $50 each, so the margins are very thin, and they often have to split that with the owner of the original license as well. But all of the companies quoted here agree that that's a big part of their philosophy that they don't resent, because, as Mendel says, financially supporting game creators is essential for building a sustainable market. So it sounds like they got a good thing going. I think I don't own an Atari, but I do own some somewhat older consoles. And I feel like I would definitely buy a new game for the PlayStation 1 or the GameCube or something.
I see it as a very niche thing, but is it niche or cult? How would you describe the market? Like, because it's kind of both of those, but it's really robust at the same time. I had no idea.
And, you know, with any luck, they've got at least 10 good years before they start abusing their developers like the rest of the industry does.
Then it's that old retro game workshop, you know, those sweatshop game devs where they're just pushing out indie games left and right.
Yep. 80 hours a week with no overtime. Sounds good.
Yep.
Next link.
Next link. All right. From Knowledgeable Magazine, can playing video games make you smarter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, not according to my parents.
Short answer, yes and no.
Oh.
Depends on the game, is what they say. So the bad news is that most off-the-shelf games, they're not improving the cognitive skills. Yeah. And that includes puzzle games, adventure games, or even some of those brain training games.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Those aren't the ones that help. Any guesses on the best one to improve your cognitive skills might be?
Best genre of video game?
Factorio, I would assume. Those manufacturing games. I don't know.
First-person shooters.
Oh, no.
Interesting.
So what they're also on, right? We also have to be careful with the smarter.
Right.
What they're getting on is the ability to multitask. And that's also a bit of a misnomer in the psychology field. It's really task switching. So your attention is never fully on one. We like to believe we can multitask, but the good news is here, right? They are working on non-violent games that can help with this. So,
like first-person shooters that are not actually shooting.
Right. First-person gooers. Or...
Yeah, that are non-violent, that still hold those same principles. So they have one called All You Can ET.
Okay.
So these aliens are falling from the sky, and they're deciding whether or not they want a drink or some candy of a specific kind, and they're constantly changing what they want. So you're constantly switching that, which it's keeping you focused.
Mm-hmm.
So a neuroscientist, Adam Gazzali, created a game called NeuroRacer, a car driving multitasking game, which is trains attention control skill in other adults. And then a company also parlayed that same tech to develop Endeavor RX, which helps kids with ADD. And in 2020, it became the first ever video game approved for medical marketing by the FDA.
Oh, I bet somebody lobbied hard to get that badge of approval.
Yeah, I think there has always been an issue of people who aren't game designers trying to make something for a scientific purpose.
Correct.
And you end up with these terrible, terrible products, like educational software for kids, where it's like, oh, it's a fun math flash game, and it gets old in 5 minutes because you don't have somebody who actually knows what they're doing from the game-making side of it. So if they can really get them together and make good games that achieve these things that they're trying to achieve, fantastic. I mean, I think until that happens, we're all going to be still playing the games we want to play at the end of the day. Unless it's a prescription.
Right, unless it's a prescription and we're doing it for our children.
All right, you're going to need 2 weekends of Call of Duty. Get
That's
your
right.
friends, block your calendar.
Take family medical leave from work, because this is important.
That's right. Next link.
Next link.
All right, this one from Wired is a quick but very pertinent question for some of us here on this podcast. Namely, can people still play the same games as they get older?
Ooh.
Like board games or mind games?
No,
video
like
games.
video games.
Okay.
This is Wired. You know, they're going to focus on the digital.
Well, sometimes they get into neuroscience, and this could have been like people who are good at mind games as children turn into sociopaths, which I was waiting for.
That's right. And maybe they're not as good at being sociopaths as they get older. You could lose that.
If only.
So, with the first mainstream video games hitting the market in the early 80s, we now have many senior citizens who started playing in adulthood, and we're rapidly coming up on the first generation of elderly people who have been playing video games their entire lives. It's basically us, right? We're getting older. Currently, a full 15% of gamers are over 55 years old, and the average age of gamers right now sits at 35 and keeps rising every year.
Huh.
But it's also very established in the scientific literature that things like reaction time and cognition start to deteriorate with age. So, even if we're all sitting in the nursing home trying to play Civilization 12 or Final Fantasy 37 or whatever, the question is, will we be able to? Or, as the article puts it, quote, the older you are, the harder it is to get good. So, Stian Reimers, a cognitive psychologist at City University London, says that, like so many things in life, the decline starts surprisingly early. Reaction time, for example, peaks between the age of 18 to 24. And the standard drop between peak and retirement age is about 20%. And we have this data not only for reaction time in general, but for video games in particular, because an app called Aim Lab has an opt-in program where you can send them your data as you're playing, and it's allowed them to collect some really detailed data over the course of time on their players. So Aim Lab founder Wayne Mackey says, we start to see a drop-off in reaction time averages as early as 22 years old. And once you hit 40, it becomes much more rapid.
Yeah.
In fact, just like in professional sports, some esports legends have now been at it long enough that they are genuinely starting to lose their competitive edge due to age. Justin Wong, the winner of a record 9 EVO fighting game championships between 2001 and 2014, says that at 35, winning is getting noticeably tougher for him. Reimers also says that some elements of cognition decline even more rapidly than reaction time, in particular, switch costs, or the extra time we have to take when we're forced to multitask. So in some experiments where subjects had to do 2 things at once, older people responded even more slowly than younger people compared to when the 2 groups only had to do 1 thing at a time. But it's not all bad news. The major advantage that older people do have is crystallized intelligence. And that doesn't really deteriorate with age, at least until you start taking into account things like dementia, right? So a veteran gamer might not have the same reaction time as their younger opponent, but they have ideas and experiences that may let them out-strategize an opponent who has maybe never been in a certain situation before.
Like if this level or game design reminds me of a puzzle I've done before, they can access that kind of information more so than a newbie.
Right. Or if they're just sticking to turn-based titles, they can take a couple extra seconds, make the right choice. It's not the same as first-person shooters where it's all about your trigger finger.
Right.
The other good news is that it's always possible to get better with practice, even for seniors. Younger people do learn faster, but Mackey says that gamers in their 40s still measured an average of 18% improvement over just 1 week of consistent practice, which almost completely eliminates the discrepancy between them.
Nice.
And while middle-aged gamers tend to have more real-world responsibilities and thus less time for practice, they also tend to be able to maintain an interest for longer and are ultimately able to get farther in a fewer number of games, while younger players are more likely to get bored and move on to the next game. So overall, the verdict seems to be, yes, we're all still going to be gaming until the day we die. And I personally think it's going to be really cool to see how nursing homes change over the next decade or two. Because once all their residents are digital natives, I think they're going to be completely transformed, right? No one is going to be playing bingo. There's going to be like, a Call of Duty night, and there's going to be the communal Switch.
Yeah.
There's going to be a screen in every room.
I'm getting this like Dave and Buster's retirement home vibe where it's like if they wanted to pivot into that, they could make a killing, y'all, because you got food, you got entertainment, you just add some housing and medical care and boom.
Yeah. I mean, you got to watch out for the DDR machine. Nobody's going to be doing that.
That's true. I felt pretty depressed about the idea of what my old age might look like, but now it's just one unending LAN party. That's pretty sweet.
Right. Yeah. And imagine getting to school whippersnappers with all of your old slang. I would love to see that happen.
Well, it's like right now, if you're playing with a stranger and you hear it's like clearly a 12-year-old child, that really sucks. But if someday you're playing and you hear like this 80-year-old man smack talking you because he just beat you, that's going to suck equally. Like that's going to be our revenge. Next link?
Next link.
All right, this next article is called Squarespace from JSTOR Daily. And it's a fun little look at the history of a number puzzle that I'm sure you guys have seen a version of. It's the flat square of tiles with one space permanently empty so you can rearrange them into numerical order. Sometimes they make a little picture, but it turns out that this puzzle was actually the very first one that we know of to inspire a full-blown national craze all the way back in 1880. It's sometimes called the gem puzzle, the boss puzzle, or the magic square, but mostly it's known as the 15 puzzle because the original version involved putting the numbers 1 to 15 in numerical order. And like any craze that suddenly finds itself everywhere all at once, there has been a bit of debate about the puzzle's origins, with most modern sources claiming that chess prodigy and games enthusiast Sam Lloyd invented it. And this guy was basically like the Will Shortz of his time. One British newspaper dubbed him the Prince of Puzzles. He had regular columns in nationwide magazines with thousands of devoted readers, and he was privately commissioned to design puzzles by everyone from P.T. Barnum to the MetLife Insurance Company. And Lloyd himself did claim in his biography about 10 years after the craze to be the inventor of the puzzle. But there are several reasons why we can be certain that it wasn't him, which are documented in great detail by historians Jerry Slocum and Dick Sonneveld.
And he tried it.
Yeah. The article lays it all out, but largely it boils down to things like he was completely involved in chess at the time and hadn't yet expanded into other puzzle types, and he didn't live anywhere near Boston, where the first newspaper ads for the puzzle started to appear. And, just for good measure, he was accused of plagiarism by other colleagues for other work, so he's not the most trustworthy guy when it comes to what he did and didn't invent.
Nice.
Instead, Slocum and Sonneveld have traced the game back to a postmaster in upstate New York named Noyes Chapman, who gave homemade versions of the toy to his friends and family. Chapman's son then gave a copy to a married couple in Rhode Island, who gave it to friends in Hartford, Connecticut, where somehow a copy of it landed in the hands of a student at the American School for the Deaf. And this is key to the puzzle's explosion because at the time, students at the school would frequently manufacture and sell small objects for pocket money.
Oh.
Which, if we're being honest, it was kind of partly because the attitude in the 1880s was like, if you're deaf, you're not going to be able to get a normal job, so you'd better start learning now how to Etsy yourself out of poverty, right?
Brutal.
Well, that was the 1880s for you.
I mean, it's also the 2020s because Etsy yourself out of poverty anyway.
Yeah, but you can work online at least. If you're deaf, now you can work on a computer. Nobody even knows.
That's fair.
But so one of the deaf students traveled to Boston to see a woodworker named Matthias Rice for the express purpose of mass manufacturing this little number toy. And Rice took the gig, but the puzzle proved so popular that he couldn't keep up with demand, and copycat products began appearing first all over the East Coast and then all over the country. And the thing about this puzzle was you had to have a physical copy to play it, but it was easy to take the tiles in and out and reset them, which meant that newspapers could print a particular starting point each day as a challenge for their readers. And so you got that social component of everybody playing the same game each day, just like the recent
Wordle.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there were, of course, easier and harder starting points, but the most famous starting point was known as 13, 15, 14, which was laid out in almost complete perfection with just the last two numbers swapped, 13, 15, 14. And people were absolutely losing their minds over this particular layout because it looks like it should be so easy, right? It's almost solved, but no one could do it. One dentist in Massachusetts even ran an advertisement offering a $25 set of teeth as a prize to anyone who could solve the 14-15 transposition. Wow. And then later, he ran another ad offering both the teeth and $100 cash. And this was the 1880s. Like, $100 was a lot of money.
Not to mention a full set of teeth.
I know. But so, by March of 1880, just 2 months after it had exploded onto the national scene, people were so obsessed with this game that the New York Times ran an editorial about how the 15 puzzle was destroying society. They said,
I'm sorry,
things really don't
summer
change,
children.
do they?
No, they don't. They said, quote, neither age nor sex is spared by it, and it now threatens our free institutions, inasmuch as from every town and hamlet there is coming up a cry for a strong man who will stamp out this terrible puzzle at any cost of constitution or freedom.
Wow.
The article also includes several examples of contemporary poems people wrote about the game's allure, such as William goes a-courtin', with her silent sits, both engaged in sortin', wooed in little bits, not a word they utter, curious kind of courtin', now and then they mutter, 13, 15, 14.
You know what? That is kind of my idea of a good date, if you're being honest.
Exactly. Like, that's how relationships are now. You both sit next to each other on your phones. Occasionally you show a meme. It's like, you know. But But so, as you may have guessed, the arrangement that ends in 13, 15, 14 is mathematically unsolvable, as are about 50% of the possible tile arrangements in the 15 puzzle. The proof for this was first published in the American Journal of Mathematics in late 1879, before it had even really gotten off the East Coast. And, one assumes that the dentist must have known this before he offered the prize. But the mathematician William Woolsey Johnson did offer one loophole solution, in that if you rotate the square a quarter turn so that it's oriented like a diamond, it is possible to get them to line up along what are effectively the diagonals from that starting point. More recently, though, in 2018, mathematicians Spencer Hurd and David Troutman revisited the 15 puzzle within the framework of something known as the Knight Tour, which is about creating a path on a chessboard in which the knight visits each square exactly once using its typical L-shaped movement. And that, at least according to this article, explains a little more clearly than those 1879 mathematicians did why 13, 15, 14 is impossible and, quote, why we might care in the first place. I'll leave it up to the listener to decide whether they care enough about algebraic ephemera to dig that deeply into it. But, it's good to know that somebody knows the answer at any rate. Also, fun little related tidbit here at the end of the article. In case you were thinking to yourself, it's kind of hypocritical for the New York Times to be slamming a popular puzzle when they're pretty darn famous for their daily crossword puzzle and just recently bought Wordle. Well, it turns out that the 15 puzzles craze was pretty much a direct predecessor to what happened when the crossword puzzle was invented about 30 years later. People went wild for them, too. Suddenly, every newspaper in the country was printing a crossword puzzle, and there was even a Broadway musical called Puzzles of 1925 that featured a scene set in a crossword sanatorium full of people who had lost their minds trying to solve them.
Oh, no!
And once again, at the time, the New York Times denounced crossword puzzles as basically responsible for everything wrong with American readers. But of course, by 1942, the Times caved to the pressure and introduced its own daily crossword, which has since gone on to earn the paper millions in revenue. Which obviously has parallels to the recent Wordle purchase. And if we extrapolate forward, I think we can expect the New York Times to buy out Xbox sometime in the distant future,
If only. I can imagine New York Times launching their own metaverse, and it's just people arguing with each other the entire time.
Oh, for sure. They definitely they lean a little more towards word and number puzzles and not shoot 'em ups.
Yeah.
There's time. You can imagine the New York Times Halo challenge. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this bonus episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. As always, if you like our podcast and want to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/damninterestingweek. In the meantime, my name is Jennifer Lee Noonan.
I'm Angela Epley.
I'm Spurr-Chen.
I'm Bradley Calhoun.
And we hope you have a damn interesting week. Bye-bye.